Baldwin Locomotive Works had a clear story in 1940. The company was 115 years old. It had built more than 70,000 steam locomotives. No other manufacturer in American history had built more. Baldwin engines ran on every major railroad in the country. They pulled freight in China. They pulled passenger trains in India. The company believed it would be building locomotives for another century. Baldwin engines ran on 5 continents. The British War Department bought them in World War I. Soviet State Railways bought them in the 1930s. The original factory stood on Broad Street in Philadelphia. Matthias W. Baldwin founded it there in 1825. His first order was a small display locomotive for a museum. It ran well enough that the Philadelphia, Germantown, and Norristown Railroad wanted a full-sized version for revenue service. That locomotive was called Old Ironsides. It made its first trip in November 1832. Baldwin became the main supplier of American steam power within a decade. A century later, it had built more locomotives than any company on Earth. By 1920, Baldwin had outgrown Philadelphia. The company moved to Eddystone, Pennsylvania, 12 miles south of the city. It had survived the Civil War. It had survived bankruptcy in 1935. Its management believed the best years were still ahead. That belief did not survive the War Production Board. In 1941, the federal government began coordinating wartime manufacturing capacity. There were too many manufacturers and not enough raw materials to develop every design at once. The War Production Board decided which companies could build new technology. The rest had to stay with existing production lines. For diesel locomotive manufacturers, the board cleared 2 companies to develop new designs freely. The first was General Motors' Electro-Motive division based in LaGrange, Illinois. EMD had been refining its FT road diesel since the late 1930s. The board told EMD to keep going. The second was the American Locomotive Company based in Schenectady, New York. ALCO was cleared to expand its engineering capacity. Baldwin Locomotive Works got a different set of instructions. Baldwin was told to stay with existing production, the VO660 and VO1000 diesel switcher units it already built. The official reasoning was wartime efficiency, proven lines, no tooling redundancy, known output. It was not a permanent ban. It was a wartime allocation decision made by committees under time pressure. But in manufacturing, a few years of development lead time is a permanent gap. EMD spent those years refining the FT diesel. By 1945, more than 1,000 FT units were running on American railroads. Railroads had seen what the FT could do. They knew what they wanted after the war. That locomotive would define American freight operations for the next 2 decades. Baldwin spent those years standing still. When the war ended, Baldwin's post-war road diesels were behind on reliability testing. Railroads were not willing to wait. After the war, Baldwin introduced road diesels. They were late. Railroads had already standardized on EMD equipment. By 1949, no market remained for the steam locomotives Baldwin had built for a century. By 1951, Baldwin merged with Lima Hamilton Corporation. The combined entity was called Baldwin Lima Hamilton. It was not competitive. By 1955, the manufacturing operations were finished. The company born in Philadelphia in 1825 was gone. The city that had built more locomotives than anywhere on Earth watched its industry end. This happened during the same years that made American industrial output the model for the post-war world. The crowd at the Philadelphia Navy Yard on July 4, 2026 will be standing inside that history. Most of them will not know it. What the War Production Board authorized in Schenectady is coming to Philadelphia. It arrives on the 250th anniversary of the country's founding. Its name is Big Boy. Its number is 4014. ALCO built it at the Schenectady Works in November 1941. The cost was $265,174. Union Pacific received it in December 1941. That same month, the United States declared war on Japan. 4014 arrived on a railroad already preparing for wartime service. It did not wait. Big Boy 4014 has not been in the Eastern Time Zone under its own power since 1941. That is when it left Schenectady. In 85 years, it has not been back. On July 4th, 2026, that changes. If you want that accounting, subscribe to American Iron Works now. The design that produced 4014 started with a freight problem. Union Pacific's main corridor ran from Ogden, Utah to Cheyenne, Wyoming. That was 483 miles of high-tonnage rail. The Wasatch Range sat in the middle. The eastbound grade climbed at 1.14%. That grade required 2 locomotives on every heavy consist. One pulled at the head end, one pushed at the rear. Every loaded freight train crossing the Wasatch needed a second crew, a second locomotive, and double the maintenance. Otto Jabelmann ran Union Pacific's Department of Research and Mechanical Standards. He identified the second locomotive as a solvable problem. Surveying the Wasatch showed that any meaningful grade reduction would require tunnel work far more expensive than any locomotive solution. The terrain was not going to change. Jabelmann's answer was a locomotive powerful enough to make the second engine unnecessary. Union Pacific gave him the authority to design it from scratch. He delivered the full engineering package to ALCO in early 1940. ALCO assigned its best engineers to the project. ALCO completed the design and had the first locomotive running under power in approximately 6 months. The design was articulated. The frame bends at a center joint. That joint allows 1,189,500 pounds of loaded weight to distribute across 132 feet and 9 inches of length. No rigid frame of this weight could have followed Union Pacific's minimum curve radius of 288 feet. The wheel arrangement was 4884. 4 pilot wheels forward, 8 driving wheels on a first engine, 8 more on a second, 4 trailing wheels at the rear. No locomotive before or since has used the 4884 arrangement. Number 4000 was delivered to Union Pacific in Omaha on September 4, 1941. Number 4014 followed that December. Union Pacific did not adapt its existing infrastructure to fit the new machines. It did the opposite. It rebuilt the infrastructure entirely around them. Miles of lighter rail were replaced with 130-pound stock across the Wasatch Division. Turning facilities were enlarged at Ogden and Cheyenne. 135-foot turntables were installed to handle the 132-foot locomotives. Union Pacific committed to this full reconstruction before the first Big Boy had proven itself in service. The first revenue run had not happened yet. The money was already spent. Number 4014 entered revenue service in December 1941, the same week the United States declared war on Japan. The Big Boys went directly into wartime work. Military equipment, raw materials, and fuel moved across the Wasatch from the first month of operation. The design specification called for 3,600-ton consists. Regular wartime service produced 4,200-ton trains. The Big Boys ran them without helper locomotives. That was the point. American railroads handled 64% of all intercity freight during the war, peaking at 72% in 1943. Revenue ton miles on United States railroads were 475 million in 1941. By 1942, they were 637.99 million, a 34% increase in a single year. The Wasatch Corridor was a critical artery in that system. On April 2, 1943, number 4014 pulled 65 loaded freight cars between Ogden and Evanston, Wyoming. It peaked at 5,530 horsepower on that run. That test result appeared in almost no public documentation for decades after the run. The machine exceeded its rated performance in the first full year of service. The institution running it kept the figure out of the record. Which detail stays with you longer, the 5,530 horsepower, or the fact that it was buried? Subscribe to American Iron Works. The gap between what was documented and what was published runs through every script on this channel. Revenue service continued for 18 years. By July 21, 1959, number 4014 had traveled 1,031,205 miles. Number 4006 was the highest mileage machine in the class. It had accumulated 1,641,625 miles, enough to circle the Earth more than 43 times. The 25 big boys collectively logged 25,808,054 combined miles in service. Then the accounting caught up. A diesel locomotive on Union Pacific's lines in 1959 did not need a water column every 100 miles. It did not need a fire crew to maintain steam pressure through a rest period. It did not need the network of boiler shops and trained steam mechanics. Big boy operations had demanded that network at every division point between Ogden and Cheyenne for 18 years. The economic case for retirement was complete, and it was correct. 17 of the 25 big boys went to the scrapyard between 1959 and 1962. Each one was broken down for raw steel. The boilers were cut, the driving rods were cut, the tenders were cut. 8 were donated to museums. Number 414 went to the Rail Giants Train Museum at the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds in Pomona, California. Open-air static display for 52 years. No boiler maintenance, no operational mandate. It had hauled 4,200-ton wartime freight trains over the Wasatch at 300 pounds per square inch of boiler pressure. Now it sat outdoors between a parking structure and a fairgrounds entrance. The California climate kept it from deteriorating as fast as it would have in the east. But 52 years of sun and temperature cycling took a toll. By the time Union Pacific reacquired it, the boiler insulation had broken down. The steam valves had not moved in decades. The tender had surface rust on every exposed surface. Union Pacific officially retired 4014 on December 7, 1961. That was 20 years to the day after Pearl Harbor. No document confirms the date was chosen deliberately. It sits in the record as a fact, and what it means belongs to the reader. In 2013, Union Pacific reacquired number 4014 from the Rail Giants Museum. The restoration at the Cheyenne Steam Shop took 5 years. Boiler components were rebuilt from the shell inward. The firebox was rebuilt. The flues were replaced. The steam distribution system was rebuilt. The original fuel was coal, 56,000 pounds per run at full specification. Converting to number 5 fuel oil required a complete redesign of the combustion system. Thousands of machine parts had not moved since the Eisenhower administration. Each one was replaced to original tolerances or fabricated from scratch. Some had to be machined from raw stock. There were no suppliers left for parts of this specification. The estimated cost was $50 million. Measure that against $265,174, the original 1941 build price, which adjusts to roughly $5.67 million in current dollars. The machine costs approximately 9 times more to restore than to build new at inflation-adjusted prices. Now set that against the parallel record. The federal government spent $66 million establishing Steamtown National Historic Site in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Big Boy number 4012 is the centerpiece. It was built at the same Schenectady works in November 1941. It was delivered to Union Pacific that same December. In 2019, the National Park Service removed number 4012 from public display. The citation was rust advanced to structural concern. The original 1941 construction contained asbestos and lead paint. Professional abatement was required before restoration crews could access the machine. $50 million of private restoration produced the only running big boy on Earth. $66 million of federal spending produced a machine that needed hazmat remediation before anyone could touch it. A corporation made one decision about what these machines were worth. A government agency made a different one. On May 4, 2019, number 4014 rolled out of the Cheyenne shop under its own power. It had not moved under its own power in 58 years. Now consider who will be standing in Philadelphia watching it arrive. The engineers and firemen who ran 4014 in revenue service were in their 20s when the machine was new. That service ran from 1941 to 1959. They are in their 80s and 90s now. Some are gone. The last scheduled revenue run on July 21, 1959, was made by a Union Pacific freight crew. The engineer's name does not appear in any published record, neither does the fireman's, neither does the brakeman's. Union Pacific's official record shows 1,031,205 miles of service. The 5,530 horsepower test result from April 1943 is verifiable, buried for decades, but traceable to primary sources. The locomotive's weight is on record, its fuel consumption is on record, its maintenance intervals are on record. The person at the throttle for the final run is not in the file. A small number of men alive in 2026 once stood at grade crossings in Wyoming as teenagers. They watched these machines pass at operating speed. Some of them grew up to work on railroads. Some of them are in their 80s. A few knew the names of the engineers running those trains. They felt the hammer of 16 driving wheels through the soles of their feet. They heard the exhaust note at operating load, 300 pounds per square inch of steam driving 4 cylinders simultaneously. Union Pacific's own engineers called that note audible from a distance that surprised people hearing it for the first time. A few were children of crew members. They stood beside fathers or uncles who had fired or engineered these machines. They knew exactly what they were watching. They are the last generation with a direct physical memory of what this locomotive class looked like at work. Not in photographs, not in documentary footage, in real time, at operating speed, on a working railroad. After they are gone, that living record closes permanently. What 4014 carries into Philadelphia on July 4th is a document. It is the closest available record of what those crews spent 18 years doing. The machine preserved what the institution chose not to name. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence. That happened 4 miles from where 4014 will be parked at the Navy Yard. That yard sits on League Island, at the junction of the Schuylkill and Delaware Rivers. It launched 53 warships during the same war. 4014 was built to serve. It repaired 574 more. USS New Jersey was built there. So was USS Wisconsin. The workforce reached 46,000 at peak production. The Henry C. The Mustin Naval Air Facility stood on that footprint. It was the only government-owned aircraft production factory in the United States during World War I. The factory closed in 1945. The yard itself closed in 1995. What remains is a business campus. A set of rail lines runs through it. A wartime locomotive will park on those lines for 6 hours on 2 consecutive mornings. In April 2026, the private effort to organize a 2026 Freedom Train was officially cancelled. The goal was a national steam ceremony modeled on the one that toured 48 states during the bicentennial in 1975. That tour was seen by 7 million Americans. No corporate sponsors, no freight railroad access agreements. The 1975 American Freedom Train worked because of one man. Ross Rowland was a New York commodities broker. He secured freight railroad cooperation before the sponsorship money arrived. 50 years later, an independent operator could not replicate that alignment. Freight railroads would not grant access. Corporate sponsors would not commit. Union Pacific announced the coast-to-coast tour 13 days after the Freedom Train's cancellation. The national steam ceremony for the 250th anniversary is organized by a railroad. That railroad owns the locomotive and operates it on its own tracks. The founding ceremony in 1776 was organized by delegates who had nothing but a grievance and a vote. Whether that is a better outcome or a worse one depends on what you think a national anniversary is for. One version was organized by people with no money and no power. The other is organized by a Class 1 railroad with $50 million in restoration receipts. Both answers are available. The 1975 Freedom Train carried original artifacts. Washington's copy of the Constitution was on board. So was the Gettysburg Address manuscript. Museums across the country loaned additional objects. The 2026 tour carries a locomotive. Whether a machine is a more honest national artifact than a document is a question the date leaves open. The machine the War Production Board authorized is coming to Baldwin City. It will park on the ground of a Navy yard that built the warships the same war required, 4 miles from where the country it defended was founded. It cost $265,174 to build and $50 million to restore. It traveled 1,031,205 miles. The engineer who ran its last revenue run is not in any record that survives. If that accounting is what you come to American Iron Works for, subscribe. The horseshoe curve at Altoona is next.